Here's a friend who we're touch phoning through tonight to say hello to and share a few memories, and that's Johnny Ladd. Good evening, Johnny.
Hello there, how are you?
How's Pusser tonight?
Pusser is fine, thank you very much.
Oh, John, it's a joy to talk to you. We've been planning this for quite a while, and I think we should go back to the Carol Reed production of The Third Man in 1948.
Don't, Philip. I know you did that. You once put in Radio Times or something like that, whatever it was called at that time, that starring Johnny Ladd.
Yeah, starring Orson Welles and Alida Valli and Trevor Howard and Joseph Cotton and Johnny Ladd. You were playing an Austrian policeman without a lot of dialogue, but by golly, you were always centre of the camera.
Oh, well, I must have been on screen for, at least 45 seconds, Philip.
Johnny, listening to your voice, it brings back a lot of memories for me personally at Channel 9, but it goes beyond that for you. And I think of people, the greats like Benny Hill, who have just passed on, and Frankie Howard, that you would have grown up with in those halcyon days of British vaudeville.
Well, we all started about the same time in the business, you see. Really getting into it just after the war.
Yes.
I mean, I'd done stuff before. I mean, the Korean, of course.
Of course.
Are you old enough to have played the Windmill in Soho?
I was at the Windmill, yes. As a matter of fact, I've just framed, Philip, my contract for the Windmill, and I've hung it in the most appropriate place possible. I got 13 and 11 pence a performance for 6 shows a day, which worked out to £25 a week, plus a soap coupon, because they were still rationing then.
Are you saddened, Johnny, when the likes of Benny Hill, who gives his all to his public, and he's adored on both continents, America, England, and down here in Australia, the three, that then people start muckraking about these great talents?
Yes, you see, this is always a difficulty. Anyone who's in the public eye has got to be prepared for this, and so often the media, if they haven't got a story, they will make one up.
Yeah.
John, while we're still in England and before we bring you to Australia, did you also play the Hippodrome and the London Palladium?
No, I only appeared at the Palladium once. That was to compare a charity show, but I never did an act there. But I played the Moss circuit and the Stoll circuits, which were the musical circuits.
And pantomimes too, I suppose.
Pantos, of course.
Johnny Ladd, our special guest this hour. John, could you explain to me and to our listeners the Billy Butlin's holiday camps, whether you were involved or not, it doesn't matter. But what were they part of? What were they like?
Well, the Billy Butlin's holiday camps were a marvellous idea. They were set up and they gave people a very inexpensive holiday. The accommodation, they were sort of little chalets, and they would sleep either 1, 2, or 4 people, dependent upon the size, and they had, all the amenities there. But if I remember correctly, the showers were like a caravan park. But then they had huge dining rooms, which seated a lot of people, and they had very good entertainment, excellent entertainment. A lot of top liners played at Butlin's holiday camps. And they would have all sorts of competitions and parlour games and things like that. Jackie Clancy was what was called a red coat. They wore red jackets so you could easily find them at, I think it was Skegness holiday camp.
Is that where Tommy Steele got started as well?
Tommy Steele?
Yes.
No, Tommy Steele started in a place, was it called the Hungry Eye or the Two Eyes? I can't remember now, which was a sort of newly formed club for the younger people. They had guitarists and singers and, more for the teenagers. I think it was called the Two Eyes or the Hungry Eye. I can't remember. It's in Soho.
Your days at Channel 9 were very important to all of us because we learnt a lot from you in costuming and timing and that type of thing, and you produced many of the sketches with Graham. Were they happy times for you, Johnny?
Oh, the majority of them are super times, absolutely fabulous, because everybody worked. You see, this is the whole point. Everybody worked to make the thing a success in those days. And it was very different from now. I mean, you worked how many hours a day, for Pete's sake? You would work 80 hours a week, very happily.
You'd have the best wig collection of anyone I know, John.
I brought brought 32 from England.
Whenever we had a comedy sketch or policeman to dress up on, I'd always race in there and say, can I grab one of your wigs?
That's right.
Or one of the moustaches. I suppose our listeners best know you and best love you as the Chelsea Pensioner. When did that start for you?
Well, actually, the Chelsea Pensioner started in England, but I only did it a few times in England before I came here.
By the way, let me tell you, Paul Sharrett's pinched your act. I saw him doing it on the Gold Coast.
Yes, I understand he does a Chelsea Pensioner. I've heard that.
Has that happened a lot to you over the years, that original concepts of yours have been picked up by other people?
No, because, I mean, my concept is my own concept, but there were two old actors, or old comics in England. I think they were called Morris and Cowley, and they used to do an act called the Chelsea Pensioners. Entirely different to mine. It was cross-talk and everything like that. But the character, which I've been playing over here for a few years now, I evolved for a series I was doing for the ABC about 1961, and Bill Newman was in it. And we wanted an act, so I wrote it for Bill and myself. And then I also did it at Channel 9. I think we did it with Mike Preston. You were probably in it, Philip. Or Bruce. I always remember you, Bruce, of course, because you did a very funny impersonation.
It wasn't...
Can you do Johnny for us?
Well,
Johnny
no,
talking to
it's
Johnny?
sort of a very visual thing in which I flung an old wig on one occasion, and I said, now, don't forget, everybody, tonight it's Graham's night. We want lots of laughter, lots of applause from you, because if we don't get it, Graham's going to be in a sour mood, and it's going to be a rotten show. So let's hear it now, nice and loud for Graham. That was your stock warm-up, Johnny.
Oh, that warm-up, Bruce. I did it to replace Bert, who got a sore throat one night, and I think I inherited that for about 5, 6, 7 years.
You did.
We've all done our share, John, haven't we?
Have we ever, Philip?
Of course, not only did you produce comedy, but I think you also used to produce Mr. Kennedy's Minstrels. Gentlemen, be seated.
No, that was Russ Stubbings and Gladys Rayner who did that. I did 2 numbers in Mr. Kennedy's Minstrels. One was... Oh, good. You're going back now, Philip. There's a number called My Gal is a Highborn Lady.
Yeah.
And they really asked me to do that because I'd done a minstrel show at the Players Theatre in London, which was directed by Hattie Jakes. And it was the first black-faced minstrel show to play London for 42 years. That was long before I came here, of course.
Did you have many mates out of those days that you still correspond with and keep in touch with?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Particularly, for example, Frank Thornton, you know, from Are We Being Served. Mm-hmm. Frank and I were in the RAF together.
Right.
And stationed together, and then with the RAF gang shows. That's going back quite a long while.
But are you old enough to have worked with or met Flanagan and Allen and Vera Lynn and people like this?
I never met Vera Lynn. I only met Flanagan and Allen once, and I worked with Bud Flanagan's son, unfortunately.
Why?
Oh, because he was a very sad sort of replica of his father. Mm. His father was a charming man. And, of course, the Crazy Gang was quite extraordinary. I mean, they went on year after year after year. And one of the extraordinary things, of course, you know, that 2 of them never spoke to each other off stage.
You know, your career spans so many different shows. Of more recent times on television, of course, you were producing the Paul Hogan specials.
No, I was comedy coordinator.
Oh, excuse me.
No, that's all right. That's perfectly all right. As a matter of fact, Paul asked me if I would produce it at one time, but then it was sort of altered.
It's a bit hard for you to name names, I suppose. You can't be sure who's listening, but I must say I always had a special... attraction towards Buster Fidesz. Did you feel the same way?
Dear Buzzy, I loved Buzzy. I worked with him before I ever came to Melbourne. It was in 1959, and we opened the show that I was in, then a musical that I come over here to do, and I was asked to do some television at Channel 7. And I was introduced to Buster Fidesz, who, of course, was leading comic there. I think the show was called On Camera, if I remember correctly. And a very funny incident happened, because in one of the sketches I was doing with him, this is when I was doing, pantomime at the Tivoli. so it would be a little bit later, this story. I was doing a sketch with Buzzy in which I was playing a sort of terribly well-educated English cannibal who sort of wore a loincloth, a tie, and a top hat. And I was covered all over in this brown paint, of course, and I was also doing panto at the Tivoli. And it was getting a bit late, and I had to get away. And I went and did all this stuff off, and all the water was off in the studios. So I was unable to have a shower. So what they did, they gave me a dressing gown and a pair of scuffs and my clothes on a hanger, and I was pushed into a cab, and away I went back to Sydney. I was staying at a place called Penimbla Hall at the Cross, just off Potts Point. And I got out of the cab, explained the situation to this rather surprised taxi driver, of course, got out, walked in the front door to go to the lift, and a lady came out of the lift, took one look at me, rushed back, never ever to be seen again.
Would it be fair to say that perhaps Buster was the funniest man who's ever appeared on Australian television, Johnny?
Oh, I think that's a difficult thing to say, but in his own field, he certainly was. I mean, Buzzy had such warmth, you see, and also this marvellous madness, absolute madness. But he worked so well, you know, with all of us, and also Freddie Parsons, bless his heart, that gorgeous gentleman. He wrote so much stuff, as he did for all of us, but he wrote especially well for Buzzy. And used all his eccentricities, like that thing which we all used to do. What was it called? The sort of chamber orchestra.
I recall, yes. The string quartet, yes.
Right, and Patty used to be the very bandy-legged bass playing.
Yes.
And Bert was on triangle. I think I was musical director.
That's right.
And Buzzy used to wander in, and I used to feed him with nuts and sit him down.
He'd have his hair all sticking up for that, wouldn't he?
That's right.
Yeah.
Johnny Ladd with us on Remember When. Johnny, can you tell us the history, or perhaps a little of it, of the Dame in Panto, which is always played by a man, but it's fascinated me.
Well, the whole thing is tradition. It went back to the old days of the masques in MASQUES in Italy, and they used to, dress the men up as women to be funny. Then the idea stopped being that, and they had, I'm trying to think of the word, castrati, of course, in opera, where a lot of the female roles were sung by boys. This all sort of amalgamated together over the years to about the 16th century. And then the mime people from the masques came over to England. I can't remember exactly, but it was somewhere about the 1600s, I think. And one of the big families that came over were the Lupinos. You've probably heard of Lupino Lane, who was the man who originated Me and My Girl.
Yes.
And now Laurie Lupino Lane, the whole mass of them. And they were the direct descendants of the people who brought Panto over. But Panto was always, a Panto Dame was always played by a man, because it is much funnier to see a man portraying a woman through men's eyes than a woman portraying a woman.
I was doing a show with John Inman, Are You Being Served, when he was here in Australia.
That's right.
And I said, are you going back, or are you having a holiday after your series? He said, oh, no, I've got to go back. We've got Panto, and I'm playing the Dame.
Right.
And he said it with so much pride, that it was so important.
Oh, yes. Well, you see, in those days, Bruce, your principals, the Dame was a name. The principal comedian, it could be Simple Simon or whoever you like, was a name. And the principal boy was a name. And the other people were all good performers, but not the seat fillers, if you excuse the expression.
Yes.
John, to this day, of course, you're still entertaining people in front of the footlights. Where are you performing currently? Is it Theatre Restaurant?
I'm not performing now, Philip, but I'm still writing Theatre Restaurant.
Yes.
And directing. We've got a show on, actually, this show I haven't written. I've done some adaptation for it. It's an old script, but it's been rejazzed. It's a place now called French Knickers.
Where is this?
That's at the corner of Church and Victoria Streets in Richmond.
Yes.
And it's a good show. It's a very fast-running show. The same management who had the theatre restaurant called Nero's Fiddle.
That's right. Out in Mitcham, wasn't it?
That's right, where Joe Latona and I did shows for, I think, 9 years.
Yes, I thought of you when Joe passed away recently.
Bless his heart.
You were very close.
Former.
Yes.
Johnny, what do you think of television in the 1990s? Be honest. Can you sit down and enjoy Tonight Live with Steve Vizard or Fast Forward?
I wouldn't go so far as to name a lot of the shows, but I think the standard is not as good as it was. The nudity bores the hell out of me. I mean, fine, absolutely splendid to use it when it is necessary, but to me, I must be a dear old-fashioned pussycat, but there's so much profanity and so much grot. I can't watch it, Philip. I find it terribly tedious.
We all had the best of it, didn't we, in the 60s and 70s, John?
I really think we did. I mean, I try and move with the times, but I don't see why I should reduce my standards.
So now you're opening with French knickers.
No, that's already opened. Excuse me.
All right.
Just a word before we say goodnight to you, and I hope you would agree that I'm using the right word here. The genius of Graham Kennedy.
Oh, tremendous. Most incredible man. Absolutely incredible. I mean, I think, Philip, when I counted up, this is a little while ago, love, we did 3,004 sketches that I was either in and produced or did things, I might not have been in them at all, produced them. And you must have been in almost as many.
Yes, I think so.
You came into them as well, but you weren't so much a permanent member of the comedy team.
That's right.
But, of course, Philip was, Patty, Bert, of course, Peter. Oh, we had a marvellous time, I think. No, Kennedy was absolutely brilliant. I've never come across anybody like him in my experience in the entertainment profession. It was so fast.
And we've had a marvellous night with you, Johnny. You haven't let us down. You've covered so many topics tonight, and true to the professional that you are, you've been entertaining for every minute of them.
Oh, well, love, I mean, we're hopefully all professionals, and both of you are, because, I mean, you provide so much entertainment for people.
Well, you get a lot of professionals, so-called, that let you down, but you haven't tonight. And I thank you for a wonderful interview.
Bless your heart.
We'll do it again sometime, John.
Lovely.
Good night now.
Johnny Ladd, good night.